Hello, this is Dr. Jeff Craig, Superintendent of West Aurora Schools, and welcome to podcast number 22, featuring Dr. Chuck Hiscock, our principal of West Aurora High School. Dr. Hiscock's impressive background includes having served in the U.S. Army with tours in Alabama, San Francisco, and the Republic of Panama, as well as having been an illustrator, art teacher, coach, dean of students, associate principal, and now principal. Chuck, I appreciate you being with us today. Finally, we got you here to the table because I know how much you love doing this.
You know it. I love it.
A lot of people just kind of see because your long tenure here as high school principal, but they don't know a lot of your background. I mentioned a little bit of it, but if you could share a little bit of your history with our audience, and people probably a little bit of curious, with curiosity, joy, and complexity, curious about your stint in the Army, why the Army, and why art education.
Okay, that's the Army wasn't my first choice, so I actually went to college initially on an athletic scholarship. And didn't do very well. So I'm maybe one of the few high school principals that is actually a college dropout. So I left the university that I started at before they could kick me out, and the Army was an option. And the Army presented some opportunities to grow up a little bit, and so it was a good experience. Not one that I enjoyed the entire time I was in, but it was probably one of the better things that's happened.
Outstanding. That's something that. Goes back to your mantra a lot of times is having some resilience and grit. And so when you find a little bit of a resistance or a challenge, regroup and re-pursue. And certainly you are an example of that. So art education, big passion of yours.
Yep.
How did that come about?
So when I got out of the Army, I worked a bunch of different jobs. I've always been interested in art, was involved in art, throughout my high school career. And then that was my major when I went to college the first time. So when I was working construction at one point, and my father asked me, is this something do you feel like you could do for the rest of your life? And I was kind of like, not really. I mean, I enjoyed working hard. I like working with my hands, but it wasn't something I wanted to pursue. So he encouraged me to go back to school. So I went back to school to become an illustrator, so commercial artist. Worked as a commercial artist for a while. And then, so I wasn't in education at all. I was actually coaching my younger brother. I coached his football team, his wrestling team. He's quite a bit younger than me. And one of my former coaches recognized what I was doing coaching-wise and said, hey, you're pretty good at this. This is something you should consider getting into. I think you'd be a really good teacher, a really good coach. And so that kind of planted the seed a little bit. I went back to school, got my teaching degree, and the rest is history. Art made sense because that's what I had my experience in.
And became very proficient in and really had some great success in it and have passed those passions on. And I want to talk a little bit about those passions for art a little bit later here. But I want to talk a little bit more in depth about we have a significant history. In fact, it played a very major role for my matriculation into District 129 8 years ago, having knowledge of you and having a trust in who you were to lead a very large high school. But our history went back. You started here in 2013, came over from District 99 as being an associate principal. And so this is your 9th year as principal here. And then I came in 2014, so this is my 8th year. But our relationship started back in 1993, just a few short 30 years ago. And I think that played a significant role in our relationship now. Certainly developed our trust of each other, of how we work. And I think one of the things that I've come to hear, and we probably have a very common theme, is thinking about how we encourage participation in athletics and activities. And I know you have a very specific philosophy about kids getting involved, but I would encourage you, if you could, share with us how that participation in activities and athletics, how that impacts our academics.
Okay, so academics is a part of school. It's a super, super important part of school, but it's not the only part of school. Activities and athletics, participating in those things outside of the academic school day, make a tremendous difference. And I'll give you an example. So with the example we use all the time, that Mr. Buckley and Ms. Kegerice refer to all the time, is our athletes and our students that are involved, their grade point average is a full grade point higher than the rest of the school population.
And that's significant.
That's a significant difference. But it's more than that. It's not just the academics. So I think it helps the academics because you're having you have a coach, you have other students, you have other people that are doing positive things, which has a positive impact in class. But it's the other things. It's athletes and students who are involved in theater, music, whatever activity you're involved in. They're more disciplined. They're more committed. They create relationships, learn how to work as a team member. They persevere. So I'll give, if you're an athlete, we were both wrestlers, and you get your butt kicked in a match, you got to come back from that. And you learn how to persevere over things that don't go your way.
Absolutely.
You lose a football game because of a bad call, something like that. And it teaches you lessons that all those things transfer, not only to the classroom, but they transfer lifelong. So I can't imagine being who I am today if I had not been an athlete. It just would be incomprehensible. I don't know where I'd be.
I'd absolutely agree with that. I think, especially when you take just case in point the last 2 years, without some grit, some tenacity, some ability to overcome really big challenges that we've learned in our extracurricular activities, I think it would have been really easy to fold our tents and say, I quit or fall down or let somebody else take the heat. But you're right, that really builds a lot of resilience in our kids. I'm reminded we probably have a very similar mantra and a very similar philosophy, but I know that you go out of your way to tell parents and kids, especially our incoming freshmen every single year, you have that same address to them. And if you could tell our audience what that is and why you encourage that.
I've had a pretty consistent message. I changed it a little bit this year because I knew we had parents that were coming back that have heard it several times. But my first message is challenge yourself. So the message basically is this. It's not it's not if you're going to take an advanced class, an honors class, what we call a reach class. It's when. When are you going to challenge yourself, and how important it is to challenge yourself? So I tell students, don't take the easy way. The easy way doesn't get you anywhere. And so we try to tell parents and students and get them to understand that overcoming difficulty makes a difference. And so if you take the easy path, you're never going to really get where you need to get. The other message that we consistently share, and we have been really stressing this lately, is that there are multiple pathways to success. So we did a real disservice to education. I'm going back to when I started and you started, where we eliminated a lot of opportunities for students. I think it was related to, some government studies and a nation at risk and some of these other things where, okay, we're to measure a successful school now, but based on how many students go to college. Okay, well, every kid is not a college kid. And so what that means is you're devaluing pathways that don't go through a college. And I'll give you an example. One of my best friends, super successful, one of the smartest people I know, was not a school person, didn't like school. He did okay in school, but it wasn't something he wanted to pursue. He graduated from high school, got a job as a laborer on a construction business, learned the construction business, eventually started his own construction company. He's my age. He is now retired, living the good life, and multimillionaire. His pathway was different than mine.
Absolutely.
I decided to go to college. I wasn't successful the first time around. But so what we did with adopting that college is for everybody, it's the only option, is we kind of devalued some of the other things. So now what we're doing is we're experiencing a serious shortage of qualified welders, machinists, mechanics, carpenters. And we need to train these people, but we can't find programs to train these people. And they're important. They're essential occupations that we need.
And I think the important part is we decided we can't find those programs, so we made our own programs.
Right.
And we're going to do our part to redirect and provide those opportunities for our kids.
Yeah. So getting back to your initial question, there's multiple pathways. I want kids to explore multiple pathways. What do I want to do? What do I like to do? And then let's adjust your plan based on what you want to do. But no matter what you pursue, it's about challenging yourself and not always taking the easy way, pushing yourself past difficulties, things like that. And then the last thing I always tell parents and students at that incoming freshman night is what we just talked about. Get involved in school. The number one regret seniors express when they do end of career surveys, I didn't get involved enough in high school.
Yeah, this is, we always tell parents, this is the only 4 years you get to choose, because after this, they choose you. And super important, there's so many opportunities, that specifically West High activities, athletics, clubs. There is a niche for every kid, we believe, and you guys do a great job of really promoting that. Super important.
We try to. Our people in charge of those activities are tremendous.
You bet. I'm going to put a little more focus back on you a little bit. Prior to 2013, when you got here, there was a lot of change in leadership at the high school. And the last 9 years, I think you've really done a great job. I think even staff that may kind of not totally align with you certainly would agree you provided stability. You provided consistency. And I think people appreciate that. At least they know what's in front of them. But, we found when we talked to colleagues from around the state that they don't know what West Aurora really is all about. I think they're shocked when they find out what we're made up of and who we are. So if you could, for those folks listening, if you could talk about what's that West Aurora High School community look like, feel like, what goes into making up that culture and climate?
It's interesting you said that, because before I came to West, I had no idea about West. It's one of the best kept secrets in the state, I think, is our community is amazing. And I will tell anybody who will listen. Somebody asked me, a lot of times we're doing interviews right now to hire teachers. They always ask, what's West like? What do you like most about, what are you proudest about West? I'm like, our community, West Aurora High School, is different than any other school community I've ever been in. So this is 30 years for me this year. And, I've been in 3 different school districts, excellent school districts, but the staff and student at West are different. The community's different. They believe in the school. They're committed to the school. Our staff is the most student-centered staff I've ever been around. They go out of their way to focus everything they do on what's good for our students. And it's not an act. It's legit. That's exactly what they're interested in. Our students are completely committed to each other. I've never been a place where students are so supportive of each other. And I don't know if that comes from this community just being traditionally supportive, but it's a real thing. It's noticeable when you come in the building. People, when we take them on a tour, new teachers, they can't believe how friendly the students are, how students interact with each other. It's really impressive.
Ever since I've been here, and I've heard you say this many, many times, we have really nice kids. You can make a lot of other comments about them, but one thing that people always land on, we have really nice kids. Yeah. And when we invite folks to come visit our building because they have a perception, usually a misperception, we invite them to come in and they find out that we have just really decent people in our buildings. And that certainly goes a long way. I know you don't make those comments lightly.
No, and I think that's the reason. So we have a tremendous amount of our staff that are alumni, and then we have a tremendous amount of staff members who send their kids to West Aurora High School. I don't think you send your kids to the high school you work at unless you believe in what you're doing. And
both of those attributes, I think, are very unusual or unique. I'm not sure that you go to a lot of big high schools and find the number. We're several hundred, if I'm correct, of alumni that work in our district.
Right.
Which is really, it's a nice attribute to say we believe in what we're doing.
Right. Yeah, there's no question about that.
Over the years, you have established some, not only a priority, but some expertise in providing quality feedback, not only at West High, but usually at the secondary level, if not district-wide, when it comes to whether it's evaluation processes and how we provide quality feedback to staff. Talk to me a little bit about why that is so important to you and how you utilize that.
Well, feedback, anytime you're trying to learn something, feedback is critical. So when we work with teachers, we talk all the time about students need feedback. Students need to be able to self-reflect. In order for students to grow, they need to understand where they're trying to go. And the same thing applies to evaluating staff members or giving staff members feedback. I think it would be a disservice for me as the principal to not give staff valuable feedback because they're so focused on doing what's right for kids. Our staff, getting back to our staff is so committed to helping our students that it would be a disservice for me not to give them feedback to help them to get better. Based on the 30 years and thousands of classrooms that I've been in, I think I have some pretty good ideas of what works and what doesn't.
Sure. And
so just giving people suggestions, hey, this was a great lesson. I think the kids learned this. I think maybe how could we make it a little bit better? So it's not evaluative. It's not critical. It's not a gotcha. It's just hey, how can we get better? And our teachers embrace that. Our teachers, we really try to make the evaluation process collaborative. And I think if we focus on that, so here's what I saw. Here's what I really liked. Here's some things we can tweak to make it better for the kids. I think everybody wants that.
And I think that some of that comes back, and some of the language that you use goes back to your early years of coaching. and utilizing it now instead of athletics and extracurriculars, using it in the classroom to coach our staff to improve and not to find ways to put the net around them, the gotcha, as you say. But this is more of an instrument to coach them to be better, because if they become improved, our kids benefit.
Right. I think one of the commitments the district has made the last year or two is that's not just coming from administrators. Now we've created some programs now where teachers go into classes and help other teachers.
Help each other.
Give people feedback on what they're doing and how can we get better. So it's not an administrator coming in and saying, hey, do this. It's another teacher saying, hey, have you thought about maybe trying your group discussion this way? Or have you tried shifting your lesson plan so that you do this first? And then it's all really, really positive.
You know, and educators that are listening to this conversation can have some really good takeaways, because you don't just put lip service to the evaluation process and make it sound nice. And it's not a checklist anymore. There's real value and a lot of time that you invest and encourage your teams to invest in getting in those classrooms and really having those valuable conversations to look at those improvements. Let's accentuate their strengths and their gifts and talents, but to look at some of their blind spots where they can shore those up so that the kids benefit in our classrooms.
Right, and it's not the checklist thing. When I started at West, we had a checklist, and it just doesn't give you any valuable feedback at all. It's too easy to just kind of cut and paste a comment in here and there, and every teacher's different. So what works for me in my classroom doesn't maybe work for you in your classroom. So to not personalize it, I think, does the whole system a disservice.
Agreed. That's a great takeaway. I want to highlight another commonality that you and I both have, and I want to make sure that I stress the dates because people misconstrue. They've heard publicly. But you and I are both getting to a point where we're going to change our priorities career-wise and see what our next phase of life does. But that doesn't begin until June 30th of 2024. So people are listening and make sure we get those dates and timelines correct. But if I could ask you to reflect back before we're both sophomores this year. If I could ask you to reflect back on all those years, is there something you could highlight as something you're most proudest of? And then the second part of that is, people think 2 years, that's a chunk of time, but it will go by so quickly. What do you want to get accomplished in those next couple of years?
I think the biggest source of pride for me is just the way the staff operates at West High. So we have, I keep saying this, but I think we have the best teaching staff in the state of Illinois. I really do. Maybe I would say even broader than that. I am so proud of the work that our staff has done, especially during the pandemic. And I'll give you an example. So we, and this was a district-wide thing. It wasn't just West High, but our staff are so committed to students. Like during the pandemic, we could have been like other districts and said, okay, just teach from home. That's going to be the easiest thing. Our staff wanted to come in. And I don't know if the community at large realizes that the vast majority of our staff came in even when we were fully remote and were teaching from the building because they felt it was important to come to work and show people that they're coming to work. And then when it was time to start introducing students back into the building, the staff were completely focused on how can we get as many students in our building as possible safely, because we want to see the kids, we want to interact with the students. Even though it might be easier for me to teach at home, they're just completely focused on the students. So I'm really, really proud of our staff. Our staff is absolutely committed to the best that they can possibly be for our students. And I want to hope that I had something to do with that. I think it's probably more about them than it is about me, but that's one of the great prides that I have. I'm very proud of the fact that our curriculum has evolved. We approached curriculum. It was a very difficult thing to do, but we shifted our curriculum away from a tracked curriculum where certain kids have opportunities to do high-level work and certain don't. A lot of times based on where they were placed in a class in second or third grade. We got rid of that, and that was hard to do, and the teachers, again, our staff committed to doing that. So now every student in our building has access to a rigorous curriculum. And I can go into any class now and say, okay, I see kids talking to each other. I see kids challenging each other. I see rigorous coursework being done as opposed to students filling out worksheets, remembering things like that.
And that's a life skill as well.
Right.
Absolutely. So in the final throes of the last 2 years, What's something that you really want to get accomplished?
I don't want to do anything new. And so one of the things I've tried to be is consistent. So the focus has been almost since I walked in the door is rigor, thinking, questioning, getting students to think, getting kids to solve problems. I don't want to change that focus. But what I want to be able to do when I leave in June of 2024, I want to be able to walk into every classroom at West and see kids engaged in dialogue, engaged in challenge, engaged in difficult conversations in a positive and productive way without being afraid of making a mistake or being chastised for having an opinion that's different from somebody else. I want our students to be able to operate in a world where they can take in information, they can evaluate the information, they can apply the information, they can solve problems, but they can do it in a way that makes sense. Because to be honest with you, we aren't getting that from some of the adults in our society right now.
Very true. Our
students do a much better job interacting with one another and valuing each other's opinions than some of our adults do. And I want to be able to say that that's happening consistently at West Aurora High School when I leave.
Awesome. It's a big aspiration, but certainly attainable.
We're getting there.
I'm going to ask you to think really broadly now. In your many years of education, what do you think we need to do to improve how we foster education, how we deliver the educational model?
This is a really good question, and it's I could potentially say something that's politically incorrect here, but I'll try to do it in a way that's professional. People who don't understand education, especially those in positions of authority at the state and national level, need to get out of the way. They need to stop with some of the regulations and mandates and some of the peripheral things that they pile on us, and let us get back to teaching and getting kids to learn and focusing on what matters. And what matters isn't necessarily test scores and things like that, because those are, depending on what your population is. I'll give you an example. So we have one of our strongest programs here is World Relief. So we have our EL kids. These are kids that are coming in from other places in the world, refugees sometimes. They don't speak English as a first language. I can't remember what the actual time frame it is, but when a student can come into West Aurora High School speaking no English, and let's say they come in as a freshman, by the time they're juniors, they need to take the ACT or the SAT test now, and that test score counts against our school.
Yes.
That student is not likely to do very well on the SAT if they've only been in the country for a couple of years and don't speak English fluently. So I would like to see us get away from the test scores, the mandates, all those kind of things, and focus on what matters. That is learning, challenge. What opportunities are we giving students for employment at the next level? Do we have programs to help them assimilate? Do we have programs to help them overcome some of the challenges that they have? Because every kid that comes to us has some kind of challenge.
Absolutely.
What are we doing for those students? But at the same time, we also don't want to create a situation where we make it so easy for the student that they expect to just be coddled. And so this is where I probably get a little politically incorrect, and that is, I think, going back to the self-esteem movement when I started in education in the late 80s, early 90s, was probably one of the most damaging things we did to students, where we're going to praise you no matter what. We're going to pat you on the back no matter what you do, because somehow we're going to build your self-esteem. Well, the research shows very clearly that was damaging. And so now we know that self-efficacy and self-esteem comes from accomplishing something meaningful, working through a problem, and accomplishing something that was difficult. That's where self-esteem comes from, not from a pat on the back. So I'd like to see us get away from the pats on the back and just focus on what matters.
Back to reality.
Yeah.
Back to reality. Advice time. You talked about the end of your tenure, end of June of 2024. What advice would you give your successor?
I would say two things I could say. Probably focus on the kids, stay focused on the kids, and then don't make changes for the sake of making changes. One of the most frustrating things for educators, and I've heard this throughout my career, is bandwagon jumping. What's the latest trend? Let's jump on the bandwagon. Right now, I shouldn't call it a bandwagon, but the push right now because of COVID is social emotional learning.
Yes.
Okay, it's important. I'm not saying it's not, but it seems like every of the 200 sales emails I get every day, probably 190 of them are related to some kind of social emotional learning program. And I think if an administrator comes in and just jumps on what the latest trend is and then kind of leaves behind some of the other things we're working on. Like, I think our goals of fostering curiosity, joy, complexity, those things are lasting things that we can continue to focus on.
And I think our kids would echo that same sentiment. I think they would say, hey, talk to us, work with us, treat us like young adults, and let's move on.
It's interesting you say that because when I meet with my principal's advisory group, which is a great group, they're kind of a cross-section of the school. And we talked about some of this during our first meeting. And one of the things they told us was quit babying us.
Yeah.
Hold us accountable.
And that's from them. We should listen to them. It's a great student voice. We have our culminating event coming up here on May 22nd, the commencement for West Aurora High School. Do you have any advice for the graduating class?
Well, my advice to the graduating class is kind of what I tell students all the time: work hard. You're finished with your high school career. Whatever you choose to do, whether it's, you go to a trade program, you go to the military, you go to college, whatever you choose to do, keep working hard. Have an open mind. Listen to people. Those are the skills that are going to get you ahead. But hard work solves everything. I tell my kids this all the time. When in doubt, work harder. Don't make an excuse. Don't try to blame somebody else when things don't go your way. So why didn't things go my way? And then adjust and work harder. That's what you do. I think the formula you gave us a couple of years ago was what was it?
E plus R equals O.
Yeah, E plus R equals O. So that is, that's basically taking your reaction to an event results in what your opportunity is. So There's an event, there's your reaction, and then there's the opportunity that arises of it. So that's the advice I would give to our graduates.
Awesome. Sage advice from someone who has seen a lot, done a lot, and been very successful. Dr. Chuck Hiscock, principal of West Aurora High School, we really appreciate you being here today. Thanks for sharing your thoughts and wisdom and your reflections.
Thank you. I appreciate coming in.
Absolutely. And finally, we got you to the table before we called it the last hurrah. So please remember that you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and the TuneIn Radio app. I would encourage you to subscribe to our broadcast and please give us your feedback so we can continue to improve our discussions. Thanks again, and we will talk to you next time.
Thanks for having me.